dust that hunts. I sat in the dead cruiser, the world outside painted in blood and shadow, and for the first time since this nightmare began, nothing moved. But the silence wasn't peace. It was the kind that pressed in on the ears, a silence that screamed louder than any siren. The glass bore the proof of what had been here, their hands. Bloody smears dragged down the windshield, palms pressed into the side windows, streaks that glistened in the glow of the street lamps. And then there was his, Eric's print. Clear, perfect, red. A mark that told me he had been close enough to touch me. Close enough to take me if the glass had given way. I couldn't look at it long without my stomach twisting. That hand wasn't my friend's anymore. It belonged to the hunger that wore his skin. I tightened my grip on the keys until the ridges cut into my palm. My thoughts wandered. My sister's voice on the phone I never answered. The weeds growing over my mother's grave. The mornings I wasted in museums instead of making memories with the living. Always tomorrow, I used to think. But tomorrow had teeth, and it had already sunk them deep. The silence pressed heavier. I tried to sit still, to breathe quiet, but all I could hear was my pulse hammering in my ears. I told myself I was safe inside the cruiser, locked away, unseen. But I knew better. Safe didn't exist anymore, not here, not anywhere. And if I stayed frozen much longer, the silence would end on someone else's terms, not mine. My hand moved before fear could stop it. The key slid back into the ignition, a faint click in the still cabin. I twisted. The engine coughed, then roared awake, the sound jarring after so much quiet. My chest seized. I braced for the windows to rattle with fists and teeth. Nothing came. I shifted into gear, easing forward. Tires crunched on broken glass. The cruiser rolled from the curb into streets washed in daylight. That's when I saw it. Not silence, not safety, carnage. The morning sun laid it all bare. Bodies in the road, some mangled, others moving. A man shielding his kid, teeth tearing at his shoulder while his kid cries. Across the street, infected, their eyes vacant, until they collapsed onto a screaming neighbor and buried their face in his flesh. The infection hadn't stayed in my house, or this block. It was spreading, fast, merciless, eating the neighborhood alive, and I was driving straight into it. The engine's rumble felt too loud in the quiet, but I kept the cruiser rolling, slow, careful. Morning light spilled across the street, bright and unrelenting, stripping away the shadows, and what it revealed made my chest tighten. They were everywhere. Not corpses, not anymore. They moved, staggering, jerking, broken things that had no business walking. The daylight didn't burn them, it exposed them. A man hammered another against a fence, teeth tearing at his shoulder while the chain links rattled under their weight. On the opposite sidewalk, a barefoot woman stumbled through broken glass, arms twitching like a marionette. She dropped suddenly onto a screaming figure, her head snapping forward, burying itself in his chest. I gripped the wheel harder, breath caught in my throat. Then I saw him, Mr. Keller. 2 doors down, always on his porch, watering plants that never seemed to grow. His cardigan was shredded now, soaked dark, his white hair matted with blood. He hunched over a body sprawled on the curb, jerking in savage pulls as he fed. My stomach lurched. A little further on, near the corner, another figure dragged herself forward. Her head turned at the noise of the engine and my heart froze. Mrs. Halloway. She used to sneak me cookies when I was a kid, called me her little professor when I first showed her one of my finds. Now her lips were torn, blackened, her eyes cloudy. She couldn't see me, not really, but her head still angled toward the sound. I slid lower in the seat, as if the glass could hide me. Everywhere I looked, faces I knew were twisted into masks of hunger. Neighbors, shop clerks, the mailman, all moving with the same relentless pull. The infection wasn't just here, it wasn't faceless anymore. It wore the faces I grew up with. I wanted to stop, to shut my eyes, to let the world pass without me seeing it. But the cruiser kept crawling forward, the daylight forcing me to witness every inch of it. One by one, their eyes fixed on the cruiser. Their moans rose, hunger sharpening. They began to move, stumbling, staggering, but closing in. I gripped the wheel, breath short, sweat stinging my eyes. That's when I caught it. Movement in the rear view, shapes, shuffling into the street behind me, slow but steady, drawn to the sound of the engine. I pressed the gas a little harder, the cruiser rolling forward, but more movement flared in my periphery. Figures spilling out from alleys, from doorways, from yards where I'd once waved at them as neighbors. From the sides now, too. Not just following, converging. A slow tightening of the noose. My heart hammered, my grip aching on the wheel. For a moment I thought about killing the engine again, sitting still, hoping they'd drift past. But the hunger in their eyes told me otherwise. The cruiser rolled on, boxed in tighter with every foot, and the only thought in my head was the one I couldn't shake. Where do I go? I kept rolling forward, slower than I wanted, faster than I dared. My knuckles were bone white on the wheel. The moans outside rose in volume, a sick chorus echoing against the buildings. Instinct clawed at me. Noise draws them. And yet my other hand, trembling, reached for the radio dial. A crackle of static filled the cab. Then a clipped voice cut through. "This is Control, Unit 12. What's your status?" A pause. Shouting bled through the channel, gunfire popping sharp. Then another voice, strained, panicked. "Negative, negative. We're overrun. They're in the perimeter. Repeat, we're..." The line dissolved into screaming, and a hollow tearing sound before static swallowed it. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as sand. My thumb shook on the dial, turning, searching. Another channel sputtered to life. "All citizens are ordered to remain indoors. Repeat, remain indoors. Secure your homes. This is a temporary sickness." The voice cracked, hesitated, then came back tighter, harsher. "Lockdown in effect across all districts. Military support en route. Do not attempt to evacuate. Lockdown, military en route." My mind snagged on each word, like lifelines I couldn't reach. Was there still a chance to find safety? Or was that just another trap waiting to swallow me whole? The words rattled in my skull, each one heavier than the last. Remain indoors. Lockdown. Do not attempt to evacuate. I stared through the windshield. Out there wasn't safety, it was a feeding ground. But in here? In here, the walls of glass were closing in, streaked with blood and faces. Shapes thumped against the cruiser now, fists and palms slapping the metal frame. A window rattled against its seal. The voices on the radio blurred into static again, fragments cutting in and out. Orders, screams, prayers. I twisted the volume higher, clinging to the noise, anything to drown out the moans pressing against me. But louder only meant more eyes turning my way. The radio hissed again and spat fragments, words blurring into white noise. Remain indoors. Lockdown now official. Temporary sickness. I clung to the wheel, staring past the bloodied glass. My first instinct was to argue, out loud to no one. Stay indoors? Where? My house was gone, overrun. Eric had ruined that. But another voice whispered inside me, softer, tempting. Maybe you don't run. Maybe you don't fight the tide. Find a place, close the door, wait this out. It made a kind of sense. Somewhere near one of these houses, a basement, even a store with a metal shutter. For a heartbeat, I let myself imagine it. Sitting still, lights off, food stacked high, waiting until help came. Until someone fixed this. Then the cruiser shuddered. A fist slammed against the rear window, leaving a red smear. Another hand clawed at the driver's side. Moans rose like a tide outside, rolling through the street, one voice swelling into many. Through the shifting figures I saw them. Shapes I recognized in daylight. Keller, Halloway, neighbors, teachers, faces that belonged to lives I knew. Now they were pressed against the glass, teeth gnashing, breath fogging the windows. I couldn't unsee it. Stay indoors? With them? Surrounded? Waiting for the inevitable knock, the inevitable crack of glass, the inevitable teeth. Number. The voice inside me, the one whispering safety, patience, died fast. The reality pressed harder. If I sat still, they'd pour through the doors, drag me out. It wouldn't matter if I was in a house or a cruiser. Hiding meant dying. I turned the radio volume down until it was nothing but a faint hiss. My pulse pounded loud enough to fill the silence. There was no waiting this out. My choices had narrowed to one. The only question was, where the hell do I go? I pressed down harder on the gas. The cruiser lurched forward, engine growling, and I threaded it between bodies that swayed and stumbled too slow to stop me. Left, then another left. I didn't think. I just moved. The road narrowed, buildings closing in like a canyon of brick and steel. My heart lifted for a beat. Maybe this would cut through to the main avenue. Maybe I could shake them. Then I saw it. The ambulance. It sat sideways across the street, one wheel up on the curb, its rear doors flung open like a mouth mid-scream. The white paint was smeared with fresh blood, long handprints dragged down its sides. A medical bag lay spilled in the gutter, its contents scattered, gauze, gloves, a needle bent in half. The stench hit me even through the cruiser's vents. Copper, sharp, and raw. And I knew, whatever happened here, it hadn't been long ago. I slammed the brake. Tires squealed against the pavement, the cruiser jerking to a halt just yards from the wreck. My hands slipped on the wheel, slick with sweat. No way forward. I threw it into reverse, craning to look over my shoulder. My gut turned to ice. They were there, the same infected that had followed me out of the neighborhood. Dozens now, spilling into the narrow street, their steps uneven but relentless. Their faces blotched red, their hands smeared with someone else's life. One of them, a woman in a shredded dress, snapped her head up, jaw working like she could already taste me. The cruiser rattled as the first of them slammed into the rear bumper. Panic surged white-hot. I could feel the trap closing, the ambulance ahead, the horde behind. The cruiser was no shield, not anymore. I had seconds, maybe less. The keys dug into my palm. I knew what had to happen before I even thought it through. I shoved the gear into park and flung the door open. The heat of daylight hit me, along with the sound. Moans swelling, feet dragging, hunger thick in the air. No time to look back. If I stayed in that cruiser, I was already dead. I bolted toward the ambulance. Not away from it, straight at the gaping rear doors that leaked the stench of blood. The cruiser behind me rattled as fists and bodies pounded against its frame, but I didn't look back. I ran, heavy and awkward, but I needed something closer, something from inside. The inside of the ambulance was chaos. Medical bags torn open, gloves and bandages scattered like confetti, and blood everywhere. The smell hit me so hard it made my throat close, but my eyes locked on the red cylinder strapped to the wall, a fire extinguisher. I lunged inside, fumbling at the bracket with shaking hands. The strap peeled loose with a snap, and I yanked it free just as a shadow fell across the open doors. A paramedic, or what was left of him. His uniform was still blue, but darkened with gore. Chest ripped open as though something had fed there already. His head jerked toward me, eyes pale and blind, his mouth working in that awful clicking hunger. He lunged. I swung the extinguisher hard, metal ringing as it cracked against his temple. The sound was solid, like striking a melon. He reeled, teeth snapping air inches from my arm, then lunged again with animal force. This time, I drove the base of the canister straight into his jaw. It snapped sideways with a sickening crunch, blood spraying across the ambulance floor. He collapsed, twitching, blocking the doorway. I staggered back, gasping, extinguisher shaking in my grip. That's when another figure lunged from deeper inside the ambulance. A nurse, or the echo of one. Her arm was shredded, bone flashing pale beneath ribbons of muscle, but her hunger was intact. She clawed for me, her fingers raking my shoulder. I shoved her back with the extinguisher, slamming her into the steel wall. Her skull cracked against the frame, a hollow, sharp sound, but still she groped blindly toward me. No time, no more room. I vaulted past her staggering frame, nearly tripping over the paramedic twitching on the ground, and sprinted for the alley beside the ambulance. Behind me, the moans swelled louder, echoing down the street, spilling into the narrow chute after me. I gripped the extinguisher tighter, its weight slick with blood, and forced my legs faster. There was no thinking, no planning, just the single rhythm in my skull. Run, run, run. The alley spat me out like a bullet, daylight slamming into my eyes. For a split second, I thought I'd found breathing room, a wider street, space to run. But the relief snapped away the moment I saw it. The street wasn't empty, it was crawling. Figures staggered between cars abandoned mid-turn, their doors hanging open. Some clawed at windows, pounding hard enough to crack glass. Others crouched low, feeding, their heads jerking in that grotesque rhythm of tearing and chewing. Blood pooled thick and dark on the pavement, running into the gutters like a broken sewer line. The outbreak hadn't stayed contained. It was spilling everywhere, spreading faster than I could process. I bolted to the nearest building, a shop front with its door intact. I grabbed the handle, smeared with red handprints, sticky and fresh, and yanked, locked. I ran to the next. A bakery, its glass cracked, frame splintered. I shoved my shoulder into it, but it held firm, something heavy barring it from the inside. Through the fractured glass, I saw shadows huddled low, unmoving. Corpses? Were people too terrified to move? Didn't matter, it wasn't opening for me. I staggered to another door, metal handle streaked in blood, and jerked it hard, bolted shut. The stink of copper clung to it, sour and fresh. Everywhere was the same. Closed, sealed, or worse. The infected began to notice. Heads turned, milky eyes locking on me. Groans swelled, bodies shifting into uneven strides that quickened with hunger. The street was tightening around me, a slow noose pulling tighter with every second. I gripped the fire extinguisher until my knuckles screamed, chest heaving, eyes darting across doorways, alleys, windows. There had to be somewhere. I backed up, step by step, until the cold press of a locked door thudded against my spine. I rattled the handle, desperate, but it wouldn't budge. The metal bit into my palm as I yanked again, harder, praying for a miracle. Nothing. The moans grew louder. They were closing in, shapes pressing forward in that jerky, uneven stride, teeth clicking, fingers clawing the air. The circle was almost shut. My grip tightened on the extinguisher. I thought about swinging, about plowing through, but there were too many. My chest heaved, vision tunneling, panic clawing up my throat. Then, "Hey! Over here!" A voice ripped through the noise, a human voice. Every head in the swarm snapped away from me, their groans deepening into guttural hunger as they pivoted toward the sound. And there he was, Sam, the pizza guy, the one who always delivered to me and Eric on our late nights in the workshop. Ball cap backwards, hoodie smeared, his chest heaving as he waved his arms like a madman in the middle of the street. His eyes caught mine for a split second, wide with terror, but blazing with something else. Determination. "Come on, you ugly bastards," he bellowed before bolting down the street. The infected followed. The whole swarm peeled away from me like water breaking against rock, their moans stretching higher as they staggered after him. Their limbs jerked, their pace quickened, hunger dragging them toward the easier target. I stood frozen, back against the locked door, extinguisher trembling in my grip. Sam's hoodie disappeared into the chaos, swallowed by the wave he'd pulled from me. He'd bought me seconds, maybe minutes. But at what cost? I didn't chase him. The thought hit me, sharp and cruel, but my legs were already moving in the opposite direction. Slipping into the narrow break between buildings, I bolted down a side street while the horde thundered after Sam. Every step felt like betrayal. His face kept flashing in my head. The backward cap, the hoodie, the kid who grinned when he handed me and Eric a greasy box of pepperoni at midnight. He'd saved me without a second thought, and I'd repaid him by running. Coward. But survival has no room for hesitation. That's what I told myself as I darted between cars, as my boots splashed through blood streaks and broken glass. Live now, hate yourself later. I didn't get far. A groan swelled behind me, then another. I risked a glance back. Shapes were staggering out from another block, drawn by the sound of my sprint, by the hammer of my boots on pavement. They weren't Sam's horde. They were new, fresh, and they were hungry. I pushed harder, lungs burning, extinguisher thumping against my thigh. My heart climbed into my throat as I cut left, weaving past an overturned cart, but they followed, their moans swelling into an awful chorus. The street tilted, blurred at the edges. My legs screamed. My chest felt like it might burst. And then the thought struck me, colder than the morning air. Maybe this is karma. I'd left him. Sam had thrown himself into hell to draw them away, and I'd slipped free like a snake shedding its skin. And now the swarm was back on me. The world doesn't forget. The world takes its payment. The moans behind me swelled, closer now, every footstep echoing like a hammer blow in my skull. My lungs burned, each gasp ragged, my legs ready to give out. Then I saw it. An old brick building ahead, windows shattered, curtains flapping in the morning breeze, and bolted to its side, half rusted but still standing, a fire escape ladder. My only chance. I charged. The extinguisher nearly slipped from my grip, but I clung to it as I leapt, fingers closing around the cold steel rungs. Rust bit into my palms. The first pull nearly broke me. My arms screamed, the weight of exhaustion dragging me down. My boots scraped against the wall as I hauled myself up, higher, rung by rung. Below, the infected spilled into the alley. Their eyes lifted, their jaws working, groans twisting into snarls as they staggered faster, drawn to the sound of metal rattling under my weight. One reached the base of the ladder and slammed against it, the whole frame shuddering. My grip nearly slipped. My heart stopped in my chest. I climbed harder. Hands swiped at my boots, fingers brushing leather, nails scraping steel. I yanked my legs higher, kicking wildly, teeth clenched against the scream building in my throat. They piled at the bottom now, dozens, maybe more, fists pounding the wall, bodies stacking against each other in their blind hunger. The ladder rattled under their blows, each impact vibrating through my bones. I dragged myself up to the first landing, chest heaving, sweat dripping into my eyes. For a heartbeat, I let myself look down. A mistake. The sight hollowed me. Their faces, all blood-slick, all snapping jaws, arms raised like they could pluck me down from the steel. Their groans fused into one, a sound that vibrated the marrow in my bones. I staggered back from the edge, clutching the extinguisher so tight it hurt. For now, I was above them. Out of reach, but not out of danger, not even close. I pressed my back to the wall, chest heaving, the iron railing trembling beneath my weight. For a moment, I thought I was safe, above the grasping hands below, alone with my ragged breath. Then I heard it. A muffled, rhythmic thud, barely audible over the chorus of groans below. It came from the window beside the first landing. I crouched low, moving slow, and dared a glance through the glass. An infected. It stood hunched in the half-light of a cluttered apartment, its arms hammering again and again against a tall wooden cabinet. The blows rattled the frame, dust shaking loose from the top, each strike punctuated by that guttural moan I'd already learned too well. I froze, watching. My first thought was simple. Ignore it. Keep climbing, get higher, stay alive. But then the realization struck, cold and sharp. Why the cabinet? The dead didn't pound at wood unless something drew them, and the way it clawed, the way its head snapped forward between strikes, it wasn't random, it was deliberate. Someone was in there, someone alive. The thought drilled through me, harder than any hunger or guilt. For a moment, I could almost hear it. Faint breaths trapped behind the rattling wood, a muffled whimper buried beneath the pounding. I gripped the extinguisher tighter, the weight of it grounding me. My pulse roared in my ears. Do I keep climbing? Save myself? Or do I crack that window open and face whatever waits inside? The pounding below, the gnashing of teeth, the swarm clawing at the base of the fire escape. It all blurred into background noise. Only the cabinet mattered now. Sam's face flashed in my head, hoodie disappearing into the swarm while I ran. The guilt that had burned in my chest since then twisted sharper. Not this time. I tightened my grip on the fire extinguisher, its metal shell slick with sweat and old blood. My legs trembled as I steadied myself against the railing. Then I swung. The extinguisher's edge smashed through the glass with a sharp crack, shards raining inward. The infected jerked its head toward the sound, eyes milky, jaw snapping open as it moaned deep in its chest. It came for me, just what I wanted. I held still, extinguisher cocked in both hands, heart hammering so loud it drowned the world. The creature stumbled forward, pressing its face against the broken frame, claws scraping at the sill as it leaned out toward me. I swung. The extinguisher's base connected square with its face. Bone cracked, blood sprayed, but it didn't fall. It snapped back toward me, mouth working, hunger burning through the wound. I swung again. Harder. The clang rang through my arms, jolting my shoulders. Still it lunged, snarling, teeth snapping inches from my arm. Die! The word slipped through clenched teeth, ragged, desperate. Just die! I swung again and again. The metal cylinder rose and fell, every impact shaking the frame, every blow tearing at what little strength I had left. Blood spattered across my shirt, across the wall, across the shards of broken glass. The creature's face caved in, jaw dangling loose, but it still twitched, still clawed. Until one final swing came down wild, hard, crashing against the top of its skull. The sound was different. Wet, final. The body sagged forward, twitching once, then collapsed over the sill, half hanging, lifeless at last. I staggered back, extinguisher slipping in my slick grip, my arms trembling so badly I could barely lift it again if I wanted to. My chest rose and fell in violent heaves. When the extinguisher cracked across its skull, I felt the vibration through my arms, a shudder that wasn't just in the metal, it was in me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. The moans below were still there, rising louder, but inside was quiet. The cabinet rattled again, softer this time. Not from fists, from something moving inside, someone alive. I stood there for a moment, extinguisher hanging heavy at my side, staring at the thing I'd just beaten into silence. My arms shook with exhaustion, the blood on my hands sticky and warm. The swarm below was still baying, their moans echoing up the brick walls, but inside the apartment it was quiet. Too quiet. I climbed through the shattered window, boots crunching on broken glass, extinguisher raised again. The air inside was close, stale, tinged with rot. A half-eaten meal sat on the table, its edges curled and blackened, like whoever lived here never got the chance to finish. My eyes scanned the corners, kitchen, living room, doorway to the hall. Nothing moved, no more moans, just the low rattle of my own breathing. Then the sound again, a faint thump from the cabinet. I swallowed hard, wiped sweat from my brow with a trembling hand, and stepped closer. The wood was scuffed from the inside, its surface rattling faintly like something had been clawing to get out. I crouched low, keeping my voice quiet but steady. Hello? No response. Just the hush of someone, or something, holding still. My throat tightened. I set the extinguisher down slowly, free hand hovering near the handle as I leaned in. I'm not infected, I said, forcing the words out softer than a whisper. If someone's in there, you can open the door. I won't hurt you. Silence stretched long enough that I thought I was talking to no one. Then the faintest shuffle inside. Hinges creaked. The door cracked open. Two wide eyes peered out from the dark, framed by a pale, dirt-streaked face. A kid. Couldn't have been more than 12. His hair stuck to his forehead, his lips dry and chapped, but his gaze burned sharp with suspicion and fear. For a moment, we just stared at each other, frozen. Finally, I found my voice. It's okay. You're safe now. The boy blinked, still half hidden by the door. His voice came small, raspy from thirst and silence. You killed it? I glanced at the broken, slumped body by the window, then back to him. My hands flexed unconsciously, still stained with blood. Yeah, I said quietly. It's gone. The boy pushed the door open a little wider, shoulders tense like he was ready to slam it shut again at the slightest wrong move. And I realized I wasn't the only one deciding whether to trust a stranger. The boy's eyes locked on me, wide and unblinking. His knuckles clutched the edge of the cabinet door until they turned white. I raised my hands slowly, showing him my palms, the extinguisher set carefully on the floor between us. It's all right, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. See? Nothing in my hands. I'm not here to hurt you. He swallowed hard, lips trembling, but didn't pull back. What's your name? I asked softly. He hesitated, eyes flicking to the body by the window, then back to me. Tommy. Tommy. I nodded, letting his name sit heavy in the air. That's a good name. I'm Frank. The cabinet door creaked wider. His face was pale, streaked with dirt, but his eyes burned with a mix of fear and stubbornness. You've been hiding in there a while? I asked. He shook his head quickly. Just a little. A couple hours. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. When it started, I crawled in. My brother was supposed to come back, but he stopped himself, throat tight. He didn't. Only hours, not days, but in the new world, even hours could feel like forever. I took a slow step closer, careful, deliberate. You did the right thing. You stayed quiet. That's smart. He bit his lip, glancing again at the broken window where the corpse sagged half out of the frame. His shoulders hunched, like the sight of it pressed down on him. "Tommy," I said gently, "it's not safe here. That thing at the window? There'll be more sooner or later. We can't wait in this apartment." His eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. "The roof," I added quickly. "Higher ground. We'll be able to see what's around us. They can't reach us up there." He shifted, clutching the cabinet door tighter. "Safer?" "Safer," I said firmly. "But we'll need to take what we can, food, water, anything useful. Just enough to keep us going." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. The cabinet door swung fully open, and Tommy stepped out on shaky legs. His hands found the water jug on the counter, hugging it to his chest like a lifeline. "You promise," he whispered, voice breaking just a little. "It'll be safer up there." I nodded once, solid. "I promise." Together, we moved through the apartment, gathering what little we could find. A couple cans, a jug of water, a blanket. Tommy clutched them tight as we made our way back to the fire escape. The moans still rose from the street below, a tide that wouldn't ebb. But above us, the rooftop waited. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't climbing alone. The fire escape groaned under our weight, every step a prayer it wouldn't give. Tommy clutched the water jug to his chest, his arms trembling, but he never let go. I climbed ahead, extinguisher in hand, forcing myself to stay steady for both our sakes. When we reached the top, the final ladder scraped against the roof's edge. I hauled Tommy up first, his thin arms straining as I pulled him over. Then I swung myself onto the flat, tarred surface, my legs shaking from the climb. The door to the stairwell stood crooked in its frame, paint chipped, the handle bent like someone had already tried to force it. I shoved an old ventilation pipe through the latch and dragged a rusted table across for good measure. The sound echoed in the still air, but no footsteps followed. Not yet. Then silence. Tommy stood near the edge, small and fragile against the skyline, staring out at the city. I joined him, and together we looked down. What I saw hollowed me out. The streets weren't streets anymore. They were rivers of movement. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of infected swarmed below, their bodies packed tight, spilling from alley to avenue like floodwater with teeth. Smoke curled from a block to the west, black against the morning sky. Cars sat abandoned at angles, doors hanging open, horns blaring into nothing. I scanned for life, for something human, an open window, a figure waving, a sign of resistance. There was nothing, only the dead, moving as one. Tommy's voice came small, breaking the silence. "It's everywhere." I didn't answer, because he was right. The city wasn't dying, it was dead. The horizon shimmered with glass towers and rooftops I'd known all my life, but in every direction the infection spread like wildfire unchecked, too fast, too wide. I gripped the extinguisher tighter, metal cold against my palm, and felt the weight of it all press in. Eric was gone. Everyone I'd known in this neighborhood, gone. Beside me, Tommy, eyes locked on the streets below. We stood there together, two survivors staring down at a city already lost. And in that moment, the truth hit me with the force of a hammer. We weren't witnessing the beginning anymore. We were standing in the aftermath. The city had already fallen. Thanks for listening. If you want to survive the apocalypse, like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments. What would you do to survive this?